Welcome everyone to Wednesday Night at the Lab. I'm Tom Zinnan. I work here at the UW-Madison Biotechnology Center. I also work for UW Extension Cooperative Extension, and on behalf of those folks and their other co-organizers, Wisconsin Public Television, the Wisconsin Alumni Association, and the UW-Madison Science Alliance, thanks again for coming to Wednesday Night at the Lab. We do this every Wednesday night, 50 times a year. Tonight we get to hear about tornadoes. These are not tornadoes, but they are twisters, and they are twisted. The cool thing is, 10 years ago today, it was a Wednesday, and my son was born this morning. I got to come and do Wednesday Night at the Lab at that night. And this is his little toy. I thought it was very appropriate that we got to have both right-handed and left-handed tornadoes on hand here. And I'm going to ask you, how come all our tornadoes in the Midwest go this way and hardly any of them go this way? Tonight, we are under a tornado warning here in Dane County and other parts of southern and southwestern Wisconsin. No joke, it was really great coming to Wednesday Night at the Lab tonight to have Wisconsin Public Radio break in and tell us to seek shelter. So we have tonight Leigh Orf from the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies. He was born in Springfield, Massachusetts, grew up and went to high school in Morris, Illinois, which is down on Route 47, and they would know nothing about major tornado stores. Yes, it's a very flat part of Illinois. He came up here to UW-Madison to get his bachelor's and PhD in meteorology. Then he was on the faculty at University of North Carolina-Asheville, and then at Central Michigan University. In 2015, he came back to be here at UW-Madison. Tonight, he's going to talk with us about supercomputer modeling of tornadoes. We probably lose more sleep to tornadoes than to other kinds of natural disasters in Wisconsin. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the scariest video I've ever seen on TV, or at least on the web, all through the simulations of his supercomputers. Please join me in welcoming Leigh Orf to Wednesday Night at the Lab.
All right, let's see if we can wake this thing up. Here we go. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really happy to be here. I am going to talk to you about supercells and tornadoes, and I've got a whole bunch of cool video and stuff to show you. So we'll just get right down to it. So when you're asking a scientist what they do or why they do it, generally speaking, you have some goals to try to better understand the physical world. In this case, I'm trying to understand a few things here. If I had to sort of break it down. First of all, how do tornadoes form? We can watch them form when people have video cameras. We can take our Doppler radars and scan storms. But the processes that go on inside of storms that produce tornadoes are still not very well known. So computer models are a very useful tool to answer questions about things that go on inside of simulated thunderstorms, and that's how I do this. Once a tornado forms, what's like the balance of forces that keeps it going? This is an important thing as well. And finally, why do some supercell thunderstorms, like the one that was warned today to our southwest, I don't think it produced a tornado. We were issued a tornado warning for that part of the county, but I don't think a tornado, I think it was seen on radar. This is called, assuming I'm right, that would have been a false alarm. We issued a warning, but no tornado happened. And we tend to err on the side of safety, so we tend to issue warnings whenever we think there's going to be a tornado, even if we haven't seen one yet. And this is a problem, because if you're like me, you're like, well, I heard the sirens go off 4 other times and there's no tornado. Why should I listen to this one? Well, the 5th one's a tornado, so you have to be careful. We're working on this, but it's a real challenging problem. So really, why do some supercells produce long-lived, devastating tornadoes while most others don't? And we don't know yet. We have some ideas, and this research really aims to take a computational approach to answer that question. So my process, how do I attack this problem? I have been very interested in using computers to solve physical problems since I was in high school. I was in high school in the 80s. Computers weren't so big and powerful, but I already saw that you could do some very interesting things with computers. Once I realized you could program them to simulate like physical things, I was hooked because I liked weather and I liked computers, so I thought, hey, why not use them both? So I'm simulating a storm, growing it in a virtual lab, you might say, and just seeing what happens. When I run a simulation, I don't know if it's going to produce a tornado or not. And I'm only showing you the ones that produce tornadoes, but I want to be clear about that. Like the real weather, it's hard to predict whether the tornado is going to form in even the simulated storm. And that's probably good. It means our model is behaving a bit like the real atmosphere in that it doesn't always produce tornadoes. So it was a real challenge to get this work to even happen, to get the tornado to even form. It took a lot of getting things to work on these very powerful supercomputers that are not exactly user-friendly. So I'm at this stage I'm burning as much computer time as I can to create as many tornadoes as I can so I can study them. You'll see I've done a lot of work visualizing and animating, putting it in motion so we human beings can understand what's going on better. We're just starting to get to the quantitative analysis part. That means when you get into the real numbers, not just movies. And then, of course, we also want to always compare our results to observed storms because the real atmosphere is really guiding us on this. Why do we study these types of storms? They're the least common but most devastating. So most supercells, about 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 supercells produce a tornado. And most tornadoes are short-lived and not very damaging. Very few tornadoes produce the kind of damage you saw like in Joplin, Missouri, or in El Reno, Oklahoma. I can think of a whole bunch. Plainfield, Illinois is one that's near and dear to my heart because I grew up in Illinois, and Plainfield was in our football conference, and I actually played football on that football field, and I saw from an aerial photo just garbage everywhere because the high school had been destroyed. That was in 1990. So despite advances in observational and computational meteorology, such as what I do, we still don't really know why some storms produce tornadoes and others don't. So one of the ways to approach this is just to simulate a whole bunch of storms and look at what happens in the ones that do produce these long-lived tornadoes compared to the ones that don't. But I do want to first talk about ordinary thunderstorms, the ones we're more familiar with, the more common thunderstorms. These are often called air mass thunderstorms. Under certain conditions, though, these rather sort of harmless-looking thunderstorms can produce very brief, very strong winds, and they're called downbursts or microbursts. I studied these while I was here at UW for my PhD, and I wanted to at least give a little bit so you can sort of compare and contrast the difference between a supercell and something like this. This is, I think, Phoenix. This is taken in the monsoon season in the southwest. You see this big blast of rain fall from this cloud. You can see sort of a hole in the cloud. The rain streams down, hits the ground, and spreads out, boom, in all directions. That is not a tornado. That is a downburst. But I wanted to sort of show you that sometimes pretty boring-looking thunderstorms can produce some pretty strong winds. These winds can sometimes get into the tornado range, but usually they knock some trees down. Here's a simulation of a thunderstorm that produces a downburst. Here is the cloud field and the rain field. This is from some work I did a few years ago with some wind engineers who are interested in looking at how damaging winds from thunderstorms affect the built environment, such as power transmission lines and things like that. So I cooked them up a thunderstorm that produced a specific kind of downburst, and I'll show you a little animation of this. This was done by a guy at NCSA. So he took my data and he animated it. This is cold air sinking. That's what forces these downbursts. Hits the ground and it spreads out into a cold pool, and this is a cold blob of air that is generated by evaporation of rain primarily. It spreads out like if you dump your milk on the kitchen table, it'll spread out in a puddle. In this case, it spreads out, and you see some very strong winds along the leading edge of this. But again, this is not a supercell. This is not a tornado. This is a downburst, but it is another type of thunderstorm that produces damaging winds. This is the kind of storm I'm interested in. This is a supercell thunderstorm. I chose this one because it has some interesting features in it. So this one produces a very big tornado. You can see it on the ground. Here are different parts of the storm that meteorologists will often refer to. The mesocyclone is a fancy word for rotating updraft. So all thunderstorms contain updrafts. That's air that's rising upwards, like think of billowing smoke from a campfire rising up in the air. The air inside, the air is rising because it's positively buoyant. It's lighter than the air surrounding it. There's an upward force that helps it rise. Now this whole updraft is rotating because of how the storm is interacting with the environment, the atmosphere surrounding it, which is, in cases for supercells, contains a lot of environmental wind shear. So you perturb this, you have this cloud growing in this highly sheared environment, and it causes things to become organized in interesting ways. Now supercells are typically broken down into flanks. The forward flank, that's where the storm is going, So this storm is moving probably towards the right, towards the east or the northeast. The rear flank is where the storm has been. Now, you typically see a lot of meteorologists studying this region of the storm for a couple of reasons. One reason is it's safer than the forward flank, because if you're in the rear flank, the tornado has already been there, or at least been in that vicinity. It's moving away from you. One result from my research, if you want to call it a result, is the fact that we really need to be studying this region a lot more carefully, even though it's a lot more dangerous and a lot windier, typically. But that's where a lot of the interesting action is. This cloud here is called a tail cloud, and you'll see me refer to this several times in this talk. Notice how it seems to be sort of streaming into this updraft here. And that is not necessarily exactly how the wind is going, but it does sort of hint to that kind of wind motion, and you'll see why I do that in a moment. Now, this is one from my simulation. This is from a 30-meter simulation. You can see there's your mesocyclone, your tail cloud, forward flank, rear flank, tornado. It's all there, but it's a simulation. Okay, this was something I grew in a computer. So how do I do this? How do we do this? You need a good model. In this case, a model is a piece of software. It's written in Fortran. It's developed by a scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which is funded by the National Science Foundation. This model was written to utilize very efficiently computers that are made up of essentially hundreds of thousands of individual computers. Really, it was what it kind of boils down to. Tens of thousands of computers, each of which has multiple cores. So you have to write code that can actually exploit that kind of hardware. You need a good set of initial conditions. We turned to the actual atmosphere for our conditions. We sampled, or in a sense, we sampled the environment adjacent to a storm that produced a real nasty tornado. We used that to grow our cloud. You need a supercomputer. If you see one on the street or something, let me know. I'm kind of looking for one. I wouldn't mind having my own personal supercomputer, but in reality, Blue Waters, again, NSF sponsored. It's at the University of Illinois, about a $250 million machine, the machine and to maintain it. Very nice computer. And the software, I wrote a bunch of software to handle the immense amount of data that came out of the model, and I wanted to be able to visualize it and animate it and do all these cool things. And it took a fair amount of work, and you do need a little bit of luck because, like I said earlier, you don't always get the storm that you are trying to simulate. This is radar. I was just looking at my radar app on the phone because there was all these tornadoes all around us, supposedly. This is reflectivity. This shows you where the rain and the hail is. Here is a blob that sort of centered on where the tornado is, because meteorologists sometimes call this a debris ball. This storm is kicking up lots of debris. It's in a pretty rural area, but it's knocking trees down and such, and that shows up as a signal on radar. This is radial velocity. The radar is over here somewhere, and this couplet indicates rotation. So this radar is telling us on the left there that we have rotation going on. And these two images are at the same, they're just two different fields, but the same exact location, the same exact time. So this is what our model supercell looks like. If you look at radar much and you're interested in supercells, you see this nice hook echo, this big area of heavy rain and hail. And we can zoom in a little bit and we can take a closer look. And our tornado has just started here. We get this nice cyclonic tornado, but we actually have an anticyclonic tornado in the simulation as well. So some tornadoes do rotate, at least in my model, in the wrong direction, quote unquote. The truth is, anticyclonic tornadoes and cyclonic supercells are not unprecedented. There have been several observed, but they are kind of uncommon. So if you're wondering the size of the problem, the simulation I'm going to talk about mostly is about 2 billion grid cubes. We break the atmosphere into cubes, essentially, and then all the cubes kind of are in space and they kind of communicate with one another to solve the laws of physics. I have gone down to higher and higher resolution to where I have about 18.5 billion grid cubes. We're talking some serious computation here. And when you go from 30 meters to 15 meters, it doesn't take twice as much computation. It takes about 16 times as much. And there's laws, there's reasons for that. But this is why you need supercomputers. It's a very big problem. So I'm going to give you a quick overview before I get into all the cool stuff. So we have a tornado that's on the digital ground. You want to call it that for just under 2 hours. It's similar to the one that was observed, which is gratifying. You see a lot of things that aren't tornadoes, but they look like little mini tornadoes in the simulation when you actually look at them in the vorticity field, which is a field that shows the atmosphere air spinning. We see very interesting things. I will just explain it in my poor human way before the computer shows you. You see vortices accumulating and sort of merging together as a tornado forms. And a feature we're calling, and it's kind of got a funny name, streamwise vorticity current. Let's just call it the SVC. you'll see it better when I show it on the video, but it's a feature that shows up in these simulations that I think helps to maintain the supercell that helps to produce the tornado. But first, some actual footage. I want you guys to get used to looking at actual supercells, and then we can come back to the model data and compare. So these are designed to sort of get you familiar with what's going on here. So this is repeating loop over and over again. We're looking from the south towards the north. This is the forward flank of the storm, the rear flank. This is our rotating updraft. You can see that it's rotating. And here is a tail cloud. This is the tail cloud we've been talking about. Notice how this rain here is kind of kicking out. Here's a different view. So you can sort of see this motion that kind of goes like this. Rain falls, cools the air, gets sucked back into the storm, and helps to form a cloud. I think that's what's actually happening here. The storm is almost recycling itself. But you keep, there's your rotation. You can see I've sped this up a little bit so you can see the action. We'll take one more look at this storm a little closer up. But again, see how this cloud is sort of boiling up, almost like it's boiling up off the ground. You've got air here that's a mixture of cool, moist air and warm, moist air mixing together, and that can actually form a cloud when the conditions are just right. And you're seeing those conditions right there. But you're also seeing a tremendous amount of rotation and some explosive updrafts. You can sort of see the updrafts shooting up. It's easier to see on the computer screen. This is one of my last sequences. Here again is the forward flank. Notice how the air is kind of streaming in and forming this little cloud here. There's a theme here, and I am focusing on things that I've seen in the model, but I'm seeing this in several. I just went out to YouTube and looked for time-lapse of supercells, and I saw a lot of things that my model shows. Because I'm not a field meteorologist. I do collaborate with field meteorologists. But anyway, you sort of see a pattern here. And this is my favorite one, my last one. Is, here's your tail cloud, your forward flank of the storm, the mesocyclone. And just look at this kind of streaming right in. Right here is where you'd expect that tornado to drop right out of that cloud. And that's what, I'm not sure if this particular one did, but now I'm going to start showing you some of the simulation data. But that should give you at least a general idea of what to look for or where I'm looking in the storm. Here's one more that actually shows a tornado form. This low-hanging cloud that you see here is called a wall cloud. It's not always there with supercells. Usually it's there, but it's like this little collar that kind of goes around the tornado if the tornado forms. And the tornado typically descends out of that region where the wall cloud. If the wall cloud is probably just air from the tail cloud that's being wrapped around. But meteorologists give it a name because we do that thing. That's what we do. Give things names. This is some footage from my collaborators, Bruce and Kathy, who are also doing research with me. Here's sped up 4 times. Here's a tornado, and you can see these little multiple vortices. You can see little hints of them. So you see one tornado, it just looks like a funnel, but there's actually little, sort of like a razor, or Norelco razor, if you know what that is. You've got little vortices kind of rotating around one another. This is in real time showing the tornado when it sort of looks like a big, tall stovepipe. And this is an interesting event. This is in Pilger, Nebraska in 2014. 2 tornadoes from 2 supercells. These tornadoes eventually end up merging. But you can see the tremendous power of this thing. This was an EF4, the second highest category. And you can see, if you look closely, debris being sort of swung out there. This guy's like, oh yeah, it's just another day in Nebraska, just driving down the road. I'm like, where did he start? Because it's like, he must have just been there, right? But you can see stuff flying out. But yeah, these, pretty powerful stuff. And this is the kind of storm that we're trying to simulate. And some of the things that you see here, and here's the final sequence I'll show you of observations. This is that monster tornado. It's weakened, and then this other tornado has gotten stronger, and this is sped up a little bit, but you'll see, and sorry for the shaky video, but this guy will kind of come in here and merge with that one. So you see vortex mergers, you see all sorts of interesting things, tail clouds. So this is sort of giving you an idea of what we see with our eyes. Now we get back to the simulation. So you've seen this before. Here's the domain size, 120 kilometers on a side, 20 kilometers tall. This is the full model. I'm zooming in now, and you can see that tiny little tornado there. Well, it looks tiny. We have to simulate the whole storm at basically the resolution that that tornado is at. So you have to resolve. When we say resolve a tornado, it means we have to have enough grid cubes that are making up that tornado. And we don't know where the tornado is going to be, so we got to throw a lot of grid cubes at it. Okay, so the whole thing requires a tremendous amount of computation. All right, so this is one of my newer simulations. It's going to run for like 2 minutes. So here we are. Here's the mesocyclone here. Here's the sort of tail cloud that's kind of forming. This is the forward flank region where the rain is falling and sort of sweeping in. Here's the rear flank. So keep your eyes right about here. You see all these little, sort of like little tags in the cloud field. One of those is going to become a tornado. And it's going to happen right about now. So there it is. Interesting. All right, now what led to that? Well, we can't see it just looking at the cloud and the rain, although I did this because I wanted to show what we see in the model, which is our eyeballs see cloud and rain. So here I've done something. Here's the forward flank and the rear flank. This is the surface temperature perturbation. So cold is blue. Cold air, the storm is producing cold air, it's in blue. Here's the forward flank and the rear flank. So this is the surface, like looking at a weather map. This is reflectivity, which is radar, what the radar sees. And this is the updraft. And what happens prior to this tornado forming is this updraft, 1 kilometer above the ground, gets really strong. Okay, that's one thing. We're looking for precursors to the tornado formation so that we can hopefully forecast these down the road. So the thing I noticed, one of the things I noticed when I studied the updraft is it gets really strong. You see these dark reds? You have updrafts 1 kilometer above the ground exceeding, say, 150 miles an hour. That's air going up, okay? So that's there. One thing that this simulation has showed me is that the updrafts in these things near the ground are tremendously strong. Stronger than I think we may have assumed in the past. Now, I'm not saying that the model is right necessarily, but it's really hard to measure updrafts a couple hundred meters above the ground if you're not using a model. So we have to sort of assume the model is probably doing the right thing, but we still have to find these things in Mother Nature. And that's the job for my cohorts in the field who are field meteorologists. But as I've been talking here, this thing is just churning along. Now it looks like it's just sitting in place, but the whole storm is moving towards the northeast at about 40 miles an hour. The reason we move the box with the storm is so it doesn't just go away and we lose our storm. So as a trick we use is we simply move the model domain with the storm. It's actually not really a trick. It's pretty easy to do it. It's what all cloud models do for this kind of environment where the storm is actually moving. Now you can see it's gotten wider. It's hard to see in here, but there's little multiple vortices spinning around, and you can sort of see them show themselves once in a while, and I got some slides that show this better. But it's just cranking and cranking. It's sucking up all that cold air. And this is another thing that was kind of a surprise to me is that this tornado is actually thriving on lifting this cold air. Cold air is heavier than warm air, okay? Given the same conditions, and one's colder, one's warmer, the cold air is a little heavier. You'd expect it to be harder to lift the cold air, and it is, but the thing is, the updraft is parked right over this boundary, so it's sucking up cold air, but it's also sucking up air that's rotating, and it's tilting it into the vertical. And that rotation, that enhanced rotation, is helping, I think, to drop the pressure, which is helping to make the updraft stronger, which is helping to form a tornado. So, but that's what we have to get quantitative into this. Now, eventually, yes, this is a dangerous condition. If you're in a real tornado, it gets wrapped in rain. This is extremely dangerous. If you're a storm chaser and you're in this mess, you're in grave danger because there's still a tornado in there. It is weakening, but there's a tornado in there. And, the chaser, some of the chaser accidents and such that I've heard of people driving in heavy rain or getting blown off the road from strong gusts of wind because they're too close to the storm. There seems to be a new sport of extreme storm chasing that I'm not entirely crazy about, because all you need is a cell phone and a radar app to get to where the storms are now. It's actually quite easy to chase. Here I'm doing the same sequence as before, but this thing that looks like a kayak is actually the updraft being volume rendered. The updraft is what I'm focusing on because it seems to be, it's like the heart of the storm. The updraft is being forced by other things, but the updraft itself is what's responsible for a lot of the action. So we don't have a tornado yet. Here's the cloud field, here's the radar reflectivity, and here's that cold pool again. But you'll see, it'll show up. I've clipped it at 1 kilometer above the ground. So what you start to see yellows here, that's the updraft getting stronger. That's the updraft getting closer to, say, 40 meters per second, say 100 miles an hour or so. Now the tornado's there. You see the tornado has a signature in the updraft field as well. There's actually a small downdraft that's in the center of the tornado, just like a hurricane. Most tornadoes have eyes. In other words, a sinking downdraft in the center. You'll see evidence of that in a little bit. But it's just cranking along. And part of me looks at this and I'm amazed at how it's almost like this isn't moving. It's just locked in place. It's smooth. There's definitely some things that we can look at that are sort of in balance, that we can try to look at the part that's balanced and then sort of figure out what's going on with the tornado. But it just goes and goes. And this is 10 frames. Let's see, this is 1 frame per second, 30 frames per second for your eyeballs. So you're seeing, I'm saving data every second. So you're seeing a lot of information. This was the hardest part of this problem so far, has been finding a way to save data that frequently and not go crazy, because it creates a couple hundred terabytes of data. That's a lot of data that goes into these things. So the updraft gets very close to the ground. You can see downdraft air. The blues are downdraft. So what ends up sort of killing this thing is that you start to see a lot of downdraft air sort of impinging upon this updraft. And you'll sort of see it coming in from the forward flank over here and some from the rear flank over here. But where you see these big curtains of blue, that's precipitation. That's rain falling. You can see it here in the reflectivity image. So we're looking towards the west, but see this wall here? That's this. You're seeing the downdraft that's associated with this heavy precipitation. And eventually, as you'll see, it just gets kind of clobbered by rain. We've already seen it in the previous sequence, but eventually it just kind of gets, this updraft gets eroded to the point where the tornado just can't be maintained. And this is the big one. When you see this big push of precipitation that starts to come in from the side, this is when it starts to get obscured and it eventually gets weaker. But not before doing some EF5 damage. This thing is rain-wrapped doing EF5 damage, which is probably the absolute worst possible situation that you could be in if it was coming at you, because you can't see it, it's in rain, and in all seriousness, go to your safe spot, go to your shelter, go to your basement in the center somewhere in a small bathroom or something. But it does eventually fizzle out, and I have some other slides of it fizzling out. But essentially it gets sort of clobbered by downdraft. The precipitation kind of falls, and it sort of, in a sense, it seems to be sort of breaking the balance of forces that we had for so long. Okay, so this one's kind of fun too. What I'm doing here is, this is actually precipitation. I've just colored it in psychedelic colors just to entertain you. Well, no, actually not. The colors indicate the speed, whether the wind is going up or down. Rain that's falling, the rain can fall through the air. You can have rain falling through air where the air is going up, okay? You see what I'm saying? Air, think of a large raindrop. It might fall at, say, 30 miles an hour, but if it's in an updraft going up 20 miles an hour, it's going to fall at 10 miles an hour. So you can have rain that's falling up, and there is rain falling up here. But anyway, remember the earlier sequence I showed you that showed that rain kind of coming in and forming that little tail cloud? Well, this is precipitation, and I see a similar feature. So here you have this precipitation that's falling, and it's not falling very fast. It's probably like small drizzle droplets. And it's actually being pulled up into the storm. And that's where you see our tail cloud form. And I've seen this in more footage, and I'm starting to think there might be something going on here. So you have rain falling up. Crazy. If you got a strong enough updraft, you can lift it up. In fact, that's why hailstones get so big. Because hailstones can fall, say, 100, maybe 80 miles an hour. But you can have an updraft that's 90 miles an hour. In fact, the hail formed because it was suspended in the air for so long. Now here's vorticity. Vorticity is a measure of spin and shear. But the thing I want you to realize is this is the magnitude of vorticity, and I'm shading it by the vertical component so that when you see red, that's cyclonic or counterclockwise. So this is like the heart of the mesocyclone. It's rotating this way. And when you see blue tubes, those are anticyclonic. So yes, there are a lot of anticyclonic tubes or vortices in this simulation. At some point, I bless this thing and call it the streamlined vorticity current. I'm sort of joking, but this is the feature we've found that seems to be important. You'll notice as I change the view in a second, this thing kind of wraps up around the tornado but does not intersect it. And there's a tornado. It formed. So somewhere in that movie is the solution to tornadoes. Well, maybe not. But so I'm continuing to go. There's our super strong updraft. There's our streamlined vorticity current that's bringing this air up and around. And there's our tornado. Look at that. It actually lifts a vortex almost off the ground and then turns it erect. And then it kind of, look what it does to it. See, the blue guys are rotating the opposite direction of the red guys. And they don't interact very well. They're like pointing two magnets, north poles, to each other. They sort of fight against one another. But when you have red guys coming in, they just get assimilated into the circulation of a tornado. So that's interesting as well. So this, what you're seeing here, this is like the first time anyone's managed to do this with this kind of fidelity and this kind of, showing it in this kind of form. And I've even managed to go to higher resolution. I'm going to share some of that with you shortly. But, there's a story to be told here. This is like I need a fleet of grad students to dive into this data, and they'll be happy for a long time because we have tons of data to analyze. And in fact, I'm in the process of generating more data. And now, isn't it interesting how in the rear flank of the storm, it kicks in a bunch of, I call it phosphorescent spaghetti. But essentially, it's very turbulent in the rear flank where you have all these pulsing downdrafts. So where you see this blue and red mess, it's just turbulent. It's just air that's just kind of going off in all sorts of different directions. But sometimes those turbulent eddies and that turbulence forms these vortices, and there's another blue guy who's going to get swept around the red guy. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And you can start to see it's getting eroded a little bit as this downdraft air starts to get entrained in there. But it goes and goes. And these features here that I think are important, we need to find them in nature. And that is going to be a challenge because this is, if you're actually, the storm's coming right for us in the room from this direction. It's coming to the northeast. And if you want to study this region, you better deploy your instruments and get the heck out of the way because it's coming right for us. But I'm very serious when I say this is a region of the storm that we need to study harder to see if what this model is telling us is out there in nature. And I want to also stress the fact that I've studied one environment for all these simulations. It's like one storm being simulated in different ways. I'm really interested in looking at several environments, not just one storm, so that we can start to draw more general conclusions. Because I want to be clear, I don't want to make any grand conclusions about this simulation because it's just one environment. At this point, things have gotten all rainy and the storm is getting weaker. Here's a still image to give our eyes a rest for a few minutes. This is just at the point where the tornado is forming. This is that sort of upward, the horizontal vorticity that gets tilted into the vertical that we're giving a name, the SVC. This little vortex right here is going to become a tornado. This is actually an anticyclonic vortex. And you see these other guys here, some of them are spinning one way and some of them are spinning in another way. Most of them are spinning cyclonically and they help to form a tornado. But you see a lot of vortices that are anticyclonic. So again, the red guys are cyclonic, going this way. Cyclonic, cyclonic, cyclonic. Okay, that's good. These three just sort of merged into the tornado. Here's a tornado looking stronger. Here's an anticyclonic vortex, so it's rotating this way. So you have one rotating this way, one rotating that way. And this guy gets sort of lifted up the tornado like we've seen before. But this is something that surprised me. There's a whole lot of rotation going on at different scales. Here we go again. That vortex I just showed you got lifted and tilted. Now it's a horizontally oriented vortex. It looks like a hairpin. There's a vortex going through that one. It's like all twisted up. It's so cool. Same kind of thing going on. Anticyclonic, anticyclonic, cyclonic, cyclonic, and then more phosphorescent spaghetti. So a lot of turbulent action going on. How much of that is important and how much of it is just happening? Well, we don't know yet. We really only started looking at these simulations at this kind of resolution recently. So here I'm just going to let some air parcels go and watch where the air goes. Just drop parcels near the ground, and immediately you can see both the tornado and the streamwise vorticity current. So this is just, I'm just letting parcels go from near the surface. Like everyone throws up a big beach ball every 2 seconds, only the beach ball is completely negatively buoyant. And boof, 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 watch the beach balls go. So this is our SVC, this is our tornado, this is the gust front, the rear flank gust front. It all kind of shows up, and I've shaded it by speed. So the air is moving faster here than it is here, for instance, but it's moving really fast in the tornado, as you might expect. So all these different ways of looking at the same thing. This is that streamwise vorticity current thing. If you're looking at a radar, here's your hook echo, you would expect it to be sort of streaming in from the north, sort of, and wrapping around. Again, this is something that if we're going to find, we're going to have to look pretty hard for it. Here's a figure that kind of shows. There's that SVC thing. These are just parcels being let. Notice how it's rotating as it goes. Here's our tornado, and we'll just kind of go up the tornado and watch. This thing is rotating, but it's also the path is rotating. So it's really kind of cool. The path of this thing is a helix, but it's moving in a helical direction. So it's moving helically, but it's also shaped like a helix. It's just like rotation all the way down. But this is an interesting feature. Basically, the storm is organizing vorticity in an interesting way that I think is helping to make it stronger. And this is something that, this is where we're going with this. Here's a really cool sequence. This is the best rendering of a thunderstorm I've seen by David Bach and NCSA, one of the folks I've collaborated with. There's the model grid. We're going to plop the storm down. This is just the cloud field, so there's no rain in this. But David has done a very good job of using shadows and such to make it look really spiffy. There's the overshooting thunderstorm top, mammatus clouds, and we let this go for about 800 seconds. There's our tornado on the ground. We're going about 30 times real time, 60 times real time. And you can see that explosive growth you would see with the time lapse of the supercell. It looks very similar, and this is, like I said, this is very, very nice rendering. So David took my data and made it look really good. Here's that streamwise vorticity current thing. I'm just releasing air parcels, letting them go and seeing where they end up. Notice how they rotate. They're rotating horizontally, and then they turn upwards, and now they're rotating vertically. And tornadoes are all about vertical rotation, right? Rotation about a vertical axis. Here you have rotation about a horizontal axis that then becomes tilted into the vertical, and that's important. That's an important process in this simulation, and probably in real storms as well. So yeah, and you know, sometimes you can't even see the tornado. It's wrapped up in this mess of turbulence that gets sort of squirted out from the rear flank of the storm. More parcels. So I'm releasing them in different parts of the storm to see where it's going. So here is that forward flank region of the storm. That's the streamwise vorticity current in red. The green is in the cold pool air, and it seems to go straight into the tornado at the bottom. The yellow is similar. The light blue is in the rear flank of the storm, and it seems to take a more circuitous path and doesn't necessarily get right into a tornado. But looking at this really slowly, you can see the very sharp turn upwards and around. You know, the SVC is going like that upwards. And over here, the greens are just taking a very sharp turn right at the tornado base and getting into the tornado. So we're going to be looking at where the air is coming from, where it's going, what are the properties of the air, what modulates the properties of the air, all the different things we can do. Like I said, a fleet of grad students for a long time. Lots of stuff we can look at. And onward and onward. Yeah, so this is the 30-meter simulation I've been sharing with you. This is the research we've published. We've already done more simulations, and in fact, some of the stuff I'm going to show you at the end of this talk has been seen by nobody else but one of my collaborators. You'll be the first to see it. I just rendered the frames yesterday. Here is the tornado again, releasing air parcels. Remember when I said that there's a downdraft in the center of a tornado? Well, the air is getting caught in that downdraft and then immediately recirculating upwards, and you can see that. I'm just letting parcels go up 1.5 kilometers above the ground, and they get caught in the downdraft, but they make a really nice tracer for the tornado. I think that's a really cool way to visualize a tornado, I think. Okay, for this next sequence that I'm going to share with you, blue is downdraft, and this sort of green gold color is updraft, and this is going to show you the tornado dying, and this is radar reflectivity at the surface. So towards the end of the simulation, the white tube is the tornado. It's the vorticity isosurface. You'll see the tornado's doing okay. You can see it all the way up into the cloud, but watch all this blue sort of just kind of circle the tornado. You'll see it get really blue here. And yes, it's raining heavily, but I think there's some other things going on, and boom, the tornado's gone. It gets stomped by that downdraft, and it really ends quite abruptly in this simulation. Not all of our simulations have that, but that one does. Okay, so we talked about the 30-meter simulation. Now I'm going to go to the 20-meter simulation. So this is higher resolution, more grid cubes, so you'd expect to see more detail, maybe better looking clouds. And at now the simulation's gone on quite a bit to this point, but at the time I started rendering frames, this is an anticyclonic tornado, and you'll see it kind of goes away, and then boom, there's that one. And I see this in some of my simulations where the anticyclonic tornado weakens and that one strengthens, like a seesaw kind of a thing going on. And I'm still trying to figure that out. Here's that precipitation off to the right streaming inward. You don't see it as clearly as before, but one of the nice things I like about this rendering is you can see the individual vortices inside the tornado. So this is a multiple vortex tornado. We think that most strong tornadoes especially have multiple vortices in them. So you can see them in there. You can see clear air between those those tubes of cloud, which is what the vortices look like. Now I'm going to slow it down a little bit and zoom in, and I'm also going to compare it to a guy who got stuck on the side of I-39 for the, it was in 2014, Illinois, I can't think of the name, Fairdale, yeah. You've probably seen this video if you're a tornado freak. So this guy's on I-39. This thing's coming basically right across the street this way. But the reason I show this, and yes, he was okay, is that you can see, if you look carefully, you'll see little breaks between the vortices where you can see the sky behind it. And that's just kind of showing you that you're seeing multiple vortices here. So in other words, when I see this looking like that, I'm like, this is we're probably on the right track here. But we always have to look to Mother Nature when we do this theoretical work, okay? We have to validate our data. Here I'm doing vorticity again, blue guys and red guys. So the blue guy sort of fizzles out, and here comes this screaming red guy. And I've used a different threshold here to show you just the tornado. But I'll slow it down a little bit. But notice how it's like two different vortices wrapped around each other, spinning around. So each one of these is a little tornado, sort of. You know, they're really rapidly rotating air, and then they're sort of dancing around each other. And you know, when you hear about tornadoes hitting a region and one house gets obliterated and the house across the street doesn't, it's because you've got these tiny little vortices, and it's almost random. It's like, it's chaotic, okay? So that's the reason why I think sometimes you see, you know, almost random damage when it comes to like populated areas. This is also looking at spin vorticity, and I'm going kind of fast here, but I'll slow it down. But you know, lots of action. I've seen actual radar data that looks a lot like this from the May 31st, 2013 El Reno, Oklahoma tornado that actually managed to kill some professional storm chasers. They were caught unawares of the fact that they were in a 2.5 mile wide tornado, and one of the multiple vortices came down and it hit their car. But this kind of sort of random chaotic looking stuff, we've seen this in the field. And we're pretty sure that this is not something that is just happening in models, okay? So this kind of activity where you have all these multiple vortices, these are all spinning cyclonically. Oh, that one's anticyclonic, so you occasionally get some that are spinning in the other direction, but they're very short-lived. Okay, so nobody, like I said, I just ran this simulation a few days ago, just got the data, and I just rendered some frames, and some of them are ready for this talk. And I did this on purpose. I wanted to get this ready for you guys. So nobody else has seen this. This is 15 meter. I can say with pretty good certitude that, or certainty that nobody else has done a simulation at this scale of a thunderstorm. I don't think so. This is like almost 20 billion grid points at 15 meters. Again, this guy's anticyclonic where I happen to start, but look at the tail cloud region, how much more realistic it looks. And you can starting to see convective elements. The blue is just where the cold air is, the boundary between the cold air and the air ahead of it. But I'll let this go. But this is pretty exciting. And you can see the explosive upward growth. You can see these elements kind of going up. And you see that in the field all the time when you look at the base of the storm. So yes, we get a tornado. It's cyclonic. It's EF5. It's very strong. You see the same kind of things with these sporadic downdrafts in the rear flank with the rain. You'll see rain coming around to wrap it. But notice how messier and sort of more detailed things are. As you go to higher resolution, you start to resolve things more and you start to see more of that detail. And you can see there's an interesting boundary between cold air and warmer air over here. We didn't see that boundary over here in the 30-meter simulation. It was over here somewhere. So I think one of the results of increasing the resolution is it changes the structure of the cold pool just a little bit. Again, we've got a lot of work to do to unpack all this. But it goes, oh, hello, what are you? Hello there, let's dance, woo! And this is cool. I mean, really, I've never seen anything like this. So that was an anticyclonic. It came and went. That's cyclonic again. And the simulation stopped right here. So I've got the rest of the simulation sitting on the supercomputer ready to go. I just need to get it going again. So we haven't finished that one yet. We don't know how the story ends. And here is that vorticity thing again. Now, like I said, there's so much detail here, you probably can't see it all very well. But this is that same streamwise vorticity current area. You're going to see the air kind of come up and around. There's your anticyclonic blue guy, and the tornado hasn't formed yet. So red is cyclonic, blue anti, and gray is horizontal, so if it's rolling like parallel to the ground. And I'll run this a couple times. But yeah, I look at this and I can just put this on my computer screen and watch it all day, basically. And there's your tornado. So, you know, what I see as well, you know, it seems like there's this wraparound thing that happens aloft before the tornado really forms. It's like something kind of back here just gets strong enough, it just kind of encircles the region that's sort of trying to form a tornado, and then boom. That is completely just, you know, based upon my observations of this. Right when you see this kind of come around, that's when it seems the tornado forms. So we've got a lot to do, but the fact that we actually did this is a big deal, because it's really hard to wrestle a supercomputer into submission, basically, and get it to do this kind of, it's really hard. I can't tell you how many times I failed at this before I got success. Now you can really see the SVC. See how it's horizontally rotating? And then it gets tilted upwards. And this is a really nice way to show that. Yes, it's a turbulent mess, but it's still, there's overall, I slow it down a little bit here. You can see how the rotation is basically this way, and then it gets tilted this way, and that helps to drive the storm. There's physical reasons why I say that. When you have this kind of rotating element, it drops the pressure a little bit, which can help to do some other things that help to maintain it. There's definitely some positive feedbacks in the simulation that help this happen. But yeah, like I said, I looked at this for the first time yesterday. I just made this movie yesterday, so you're seeing it. No one else has seen this before except for my collaborators. So, all right, parting thoughts. If you're not seasick from watching all that. Okay, so the first thing is, yeah, we can do this now. And this is something that I am by far not the first person to try to do this sort of thing. We've had people doing cloud modeling like this since the late 1970s. The pioneers of cloud modeling, some of them were here at the University of Wisconsin, actually. Robert Schlesinger in the Department of Meteorology was one of the first meteorologists to simulate a supercell in 3 dimensions. Robert Wilhelmsen at the University of Illinois, who's also one of my collaborators, he also made a model that was 3-dimensional, and we learned so much about supercells. So I'm doing the same basic thing those guys started way a long time ago, only to the 10th power. We're using a more refined model that has better physics, better numerics. We're exploiting new computers. In the 70s, your cell phone in your pocket had more power than a supercomputer in the late 70s, and I'm not kidding, it's true. So you can imagine the simulations have gotten more realistic as time has gone on. But we can now simulate supercells that produce tornadoes, quote unquote, naturally. We don't have to kick it. We don't have to just use a little chamber model like you see at museums sometimes. Those simulations have been done for a long time. We've got the whole storm, all the messiness involved in a full storm, and the tornado happens. The fact that it happens means the model is probably doing the right thing. You'll notice I have all this sort of conservative language, or very well holding back on making any grandiose conclusions, because that's the nature of science. When you're when you're doing something that's kind of new, you want to make sure it's been vetted. Yes, we've published data, published some of this work, but there's a lot coming out, and I can't keep up so fast. I can't publish it all right away, so we're still pawing through it. But we can do this now. This is exciting. But we can do it in the model, but this SVC thing and some of the other things we've identified, do they exist in nature? Probably they do. We haven't looked for them because we didn't know what to look for. And it turns out that the SVC is going to be hard to find using things like radar, because it's just because of the nature of it. So, I've been talking to some researchers who are thinking of sending probes into supercells. You remember that movie that will go unnamed at this point? Maybe it was, it was way ahead of its times. Miniaturization has gotten to the point now where you could deploy little instruments that measure things, but there's still a lot of things to work out. But how are we going to sample that part of the storm? That's a good question. So do they exist? I hope so. Because I'm a numerical meteorologist, I study these things, I rely on my colleagues to go out and find the things. It often goes the other way. Sometimes you'll observe something, and then you have to model it. In this case, we've modeled something, and now we want to go observe it. So there's this nice give and take in our field where you have the theoretical, the modeling, and the observational, and they all help to move the field forward. So as I go on, I will simulate different storm environments, so not just this El Reno environment. I will try to run at higher resolution, try to tweak storms to get them to not form tornadoes so I can compare to the ones that do and figure out what didn't happen in the storm that didn't produce the tornado. That's really important scientifically, because maybe we can see something on radar, for instance. Maybe, for instance, in 10 years, we wouldn't have gotten a tornado warning for a tornado that didn't happen to our southwest, assuming it didn't happen. Watch, it'll turn out 50 people died. They're all children. Anyway, I don't think that tornado produced, I don't think there was a tornado. I think it was rotation on radar. But my point is, wouldn't it be nice if when you heard a tornado warning, there was an actual tornado, and you really should take shelter? And that's where we want to go. That's really the end game of a lot of research in thunderstorms and tornadoes, is that we can better warn the public to get out of their way to get to your safe space. Because all the kidding around you want to do about going to the roof or chasing storms, I mean, people do die, and we don't want that. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions. And I do post a lot of my talks and stuff on my website. If you want to slow things down and hit pause, you can go to that, orf.media, and this talk will also be show up on there, and it'll also be on the BioSci webpage as well. So thank you very much for your time. question?
When you said it was very, very hard to get the data off the supercomputer, is that because of trying to deal with the computer, trying to understand how to talk to all the elements of the computer to get it to work together, or do you have was it hard because you had to keep tweaking the model to, you know, the interaction between the cubes to make them talk right?
Okay, so the question is, what was really the most, I think what you're sort of saying is, what was the most difficult computationally? What was really the challenge? So it's the model that I'm using, CM1, in its default form, runs on the supercomputer just fine, but I can't get data out of it fast enough. So I had to basically, the biggest challenge for me was finding a way to get the data from the memory of the supercomputer, which is spread out amongst thousands of individual computers basically, and get that data written to the hard drive fast so that I could actually make movies like this. And if you work with computers, you ever get your computer to the point where it's just going really, really, really slow and you see your hard drive light blinking and blinking and blinking, that means disk access is much slower than memory access. So there's this challenge of just data, dealing with I/O. So the biggest challenge was just getting the darn data from the memory of the machine to the hard drive fast enough so that I could actually get the simulation to keep going. Because you've got to drop data, drop data, drop data, drop data in order to study it. Once the simulation's done, it's done. And you have to save data. So that was the biggest challenge. Mapping the grid cubes to the machine, George Bryant at NCAR, who wrote the model, did a very good job. There's some standards out there. One's called MPI, Message Passing Interface. It's a way to share data between things. That is already a library. It just works. You just have to program the model with those subroutines. And sometimes when you run at big scales, you run into instabilities you never thought of, and the model will, what we call blow up, where it goes unstable. Usually the solution to that is to rerun the simulation with a shorter time interval that you actually integrate forward. So anyway, the main challenge computationally was dealing with hundreds of terabytes of data. Yes?
Does it always rain when you're tornado? Because I feel like it should because of the warm air going up, but a lot of like the real life clips that you showed, like it
Does it always rain when there's a tornado? There is a type of supercell called a low precipitation supercell that kind of looks like a supercell thunderstorm, but like a skinny one because it's got low moisture, low precipitation. In the vicinity of a tornado, there's not always rain. I know that there's rain in the cloud that's producing it. Actually, the storm is producing snow like you wouldn't believe. Snow and hail, and it falls and it melts to form rain. But in the vicinity of the tornado itself, you don't always see rain. Okay, so sometimes a tornado really can just come out of the clear, well, it wouldn't be blue sky, there'd be some dark clouds, but could come out of the sky without any rain and hit you. Usually though, as the storm, like you saw in the simulations, as the storm progresses, it tends to get rainier. Some do that. But the answer to your question is not always. If you're saying, does it rain where the tornado is? Not always. Is there rain in the storm producing it? Definitely. Because you wouldn't get, if there was no rain, you wouldn't have had all that warm, moist air that you said rising and forming the updraft and all that stuff. So yeah, it doesn't always rain, but the biggest problem with rain in tornadoes is if it obscures the tornado, you just can't see it.
Why wouldn't it rain though?
Why wouldn't it rain? Because you've got this, well, I can sort of show you in the precipitation part. Where is that? Let's see where I can find it. Wow, this is my whole talk going backwards really fast. I'll find it. And the guy from NPR is going, oh God, you just broke my thing. Sorry. Anyway, what am I looking for? Come on, I know you're in here. Here we go. Okay, so right here. So is there rain? Now there's no tornado yet in this image, but this region here is often called the weak echo region, or rain. This region here doesn't have to have rain because the updraft is so strong. Anything is getting blown upwards and it's sent over here. So when you have an environment with a lot of wind shear, what goes up comes down, but it comes down somewhere not right above your head. Okay, so the rain can sometimes get pushed way off to the side where it's not where the tornado is. But tornado is basically the interface between the warm, moist air that's sort of fueling the storm and the cool air that the storm has sort of formed itself. And that interface is where the tornado typically is. Yes, sir?
How do you sort of tweak the conditions to make a tornado happen? How do you do that in a way that's efficient since these are like so expensive to run?
So how do you tweak things to make the tornado happen because it's such a pain, it's such as, computationally expensive. Well, that's the thing. I didn't tweak anything. What I did was I ran a whole bunch of simulations, each simulation in the same environment with I did tweak things, but the things that I tweaked were not like yes, no, good, bad. They're just different options. So models have a lot of different physics options. I just basically, the way I approach this is I've got this supercomputer, I've got a ton of time on it. I'm going to run a whole bunch of simulations, and one or two of them is bound to produce this tornado. And that's how it happened. So in other words, there was no intent. I did not load the dice in the sense that I'll just turn the tornado button here to get the tornado to form. The only way I loaded the dice was by going to Mother Nature and saying, Mother Nature, what kind of air is feeding this nasty tornado next to this storm? Can I borrow it, or at least get a copy of it, and then I'll try to grow the same storm. Okay, so the only way that scientists don't like when you use words like, oh, you tweaked it, oh, you're just trying to. Well, it was not like trying to get the tornado to form. It was just using environments where tornadoes form until one formed. You see what I'm getting at and the difference between? There was no magical tornado knob. Man, if there is one, I want to know where it is. It would have saved me years of work, but there's not. And just like Mother Nature, just like tornado warnings being issued when there's no tornado, we're just not good at this yet. We're not good enough at this yet. And this kind of research is this basic research, trying to understand what's going on in the storms that produce tornadoes, what's not going on in the storms that don't produce tornadoes, and then using that to try to inform our forecasters. So one thing I haven't mentioned too much is I get a lot of storms that don't produce tornadoes. It's easy for me to do that. So now that I've got a few that produce these big tornadoes, I can compare. And that's one direction this research is going. So in the future, it won't be about tweaking knobs. It's going to be about what's in the environment. What does the environment really have locked in it that helps to grow these big storms that produce these tornadoes? And we're just starting to get close. We're getting closer to answering that question. Yes?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm getting slowly some idea. And the first question I have is, I would like to call the process that starts from the initial starting point to the end point when the tornado starts moving. I call this as residence time. Now, if you know the residence time, I don't know whether it's milliseconds or minutes or what, from the initial time when we notice it forms, it's going to form, and the end time that it's going to start moving. Now, based on the time, because EFI will take longer time than the other less powerful tornadoes. Now, with that residence time, can we quickly predict that your EFI is going to come within the next 15 minutes to the target area? And the second question I have.
Well, let him.
Well, okay, yeah. So, all right. I'm not sure I understand. You say residence time?
Residence time means the time between the start of the process.
Okay.
And the end of the process.
Okay.
At which the tornado starts its movement.
Okay, so it's moving when it forms. The whole storm is moving. So imagine I'm the supercell. All right. I am moving, and I am now producing a tornado. Okay. So everything's moving. The whole storm is moving. The term, what's confusing me about your question is the term residence time is, in my field, is usually used to describe how long something's in the atmosphere before it falls out again, like CO2 residence time or water vapor residence time. So in other words, no, we can't. We can't predict what's going to happen in 15 minutes. I mean, we can't do that. So we're not there yet. But maybe you could ask your second question. I'm not so sure I answered your first question.
The second question is, I'm not sure whether it makes sense or not, but I was wondering whether these tornadoes, EFI and slightly lesser powerful ones, do they create even minute shock waves into the earth? So that if you have the most sensitive instrument, just like the Richter scale,
right,
you can say that these instruments indicate, and you can have a better predictive method saying that this is what we predict.
Okay, so your question or your comment is, do tornadoes impact enough force onto the ground that they could be detected with, say, seismological things? I'm not sure, probably, but I'll tell you this. People have studied what are called subsonic sounds that tornadoes give off. So tornadoes actually give off very ultra-low frequency sound waves. Okay? If you can imagine this giant thing that's sort of oscillating at like 0.1 hertz, you know what I mean? So like one oscillation per 10 seconds. that can actually be measured. So going in sort of the direction you're talking about, you can actually just listen to sound waves and maybe hear tornadoes. Now then the next question is, well, can you hear them form? I don't know. So this research really hasn't gotten too much traction that I've seen. So in other words, if I just sort of make a general comment, looking at the novel ways of looking at tornadoes, not necessarily looking at them the traditional ways with radar, but other ways, such as with really fine microphones, or maybe, like you said, seismological devices that could feel things. Now, both of those methods, though, rely on the tornado happening. They're not predictive, per se, right? Because the only thing that's going to make those sound waves, or the only thing that's going to make the ground move, is the tornado itself, and by then it's already formed. So what we're really looking for, what we desperately want, is something in the storm that is going to tell you that, yes, in 10 minutes there's going to be a tornado, or 5 minutes, and we just don't have it yet. That's why the streamwise vorticity current is at least one thing that is worth exploring. It's something kind of new. It's this updraft that gets stronger, and then this rotation. All this stuff seems to be happening before the tornado forms. So maybe that is the kind of precursor that we could latch onto. But I'm very uncertain about this at this point. This is very new research, and I can't even imagine what operational or forecasting, how this is going to impact forecasting in 10, 20 years. It may not at all. I don't know. It's just too soon to say. But those are great questions, and yeah, those other ways of detecting tornadoes, the subsonic waves, and then I've never heard of anyone doing it with the seismology. I'd talk to a geologist and see if maybe they have, because I know they can detect things that are not that big of a deal. You can detect them, so maybe.
So I'd like to go back to the question that I've had for several years. A while ago I went on YouTube and looked at a whole bunch of videos of tornadoes, and all the ones from North America spun like this.
Right.
I found a couple from Australia that spun like this.
Sure, yep.
Why?
Okay, you're looking at a manifestation of essentially the thermal wind gradient or the thermal wind balance. Here's a question I'll answer first. Think of low pressure systems, not tornadoes, which are low pressure systems, but like think of a hurricane or an extratropical cyclone. They're big, they span half the country, or a couple of states at least. In the northern hemisphere, you'll see low pressure systems with air going counterclockwise. And you're asking, why is it counterclockwise and why is it clockwise in the southern hemisphere? I'm not answering your question about tornadoes yet, but really it's a manifestation of the same thing. You have a balance, what's called the geostrophic balance, which is a balance between the Coriolis parameter and the pressure gradient force, horizontal pressure gradient force. The Coriolis parameter is the one that's important. It deflects the wind towards the right in the northern hemisphere, deflects the wind towards the left in the southern hemisphere. It's what's called an apparent force. It's not a real force in that it's a frame of reference force. So if you're standing on the moon or in space watching this stuff, you won't see the deflection. But from the perspective of an actual person on Earth, low pressure systems rotate counterclockwise because the Coriolis parameter, the air tries to fill in the low pressure, but it gets deflected to the right. So it's trying to do this, but it ends up doing this. In the southern hemisphere, oh, this is cool. In the southern hemisphere, you've still got air trying to fill in, but it's being deflected to the left, so it's going clockwise. Now, that doesn't explain tornadoes, but the tornado is kind of a manifestation of that. In a sense, when you look at tornadoes, they get their rotation from the larger scale circulation, sort of the way the winds are veering with height or backing with height in the atmosphere. You end up getting supercells with mesocyclones that are rotating cyclonically. Okay, so your big rotating updraft is always rotating counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere, clockwise in the southern. Well, almost always. There's some that don't. And the tornado generally is going to get its rotation from the same basic forces, so it's going to rotate in the same direction. But as you saw in the simulation, especially these short-lived small ones, they can be rotating the blue guys versus the red guys. You didn't see just red guys, right? You saw a lot of blue guys in this data. When it comes down to it, the tornado doesn't, these circulations don't care about what the Earth is doing because it's happening too fast. So you can spin up a tornado in this room just by, or a tornado, a vortex, by just getting some air moving and then sort of like stretching it out. That's how tornadoes get their vorticity. So as long as you have some initial rotation, the thunderstorm will amplify it. So in a sense, it has to do with the Coriolis force, really is what it comes down to. Coriolis parameter, it's an apparent force. And I don't have my props to demonstrate it, but if you're ever on a merry-go-round, do they still have those things, or are they kids safe the entire world? You can't hurt yourself anymore. You know, a merry-go-round, you go to the park, you sit down, someone spins you around. Yeah, this is an experiment for you guys. Find a merry-go-round and a tennis ball. You sit across from her, spin around, and you throw the ball at her head, and it will go off to one side. Now, spin the merry-go-round in the other direction, throw it at her head, goes the other direction, and that's the Coriolis force. From the perspective of the person on the merry-go-round, the ball is curving. But if you're watching this with a beer going, ah, you guys are silly, the ball will go in a straight line. Okay? So anyway, that's the best I can do in 5 minutes, but it's the Coriolis force.
Thanks for working beer in there.
All right. Wisconsin, come on. Always got to work beer into the conversation.
Other questions?
Oh.
If this is one of the most devastating storms Mother Nature can give us, why isn't there more research done? Is it like a fact? Is it because we don't have the resources, or we can't get research done firsthand because it is so dangerous?
Actually, so okay, yeah. The premise is, why isn't there more research being done on this kind of storm? Because they're so devastating. The truth is, I would say that there has been a steady stream of federal funding dollars that have been working on this research for a long time. I have colleagues at the University of Oklahoma, at Penn State, at Texas Tech, University of Nebraska, Iowa State. Mostly folks who go out and they write grants, they get money from the government, and they go out and they get equipment and they go scan the storm. So that's been going on, and there is funding. Now, of course, if I could take this opportunity to say, please give us more funding, sure, but I mean, there is. It's not like there's nobody doing research on this. The nice thing about supercomputers is that this research that I'm doing happens to be about tornadoes, but other scientists from other fields can use the same supercomputer and do really cool things. So supercomputers are a real bargain. And I had to do a competitive process to get access to this machine, but I'll be running my model, and then somebody's running an earthquake model, and somebody's running an Ebola virus model or whatever. So serious, people are doing all sorts of cool things on supercomputers. And that money is also there, okay? So I would say that there is research being done on severe storms. Ask any scientist if there could be more funding, they'll always say yes, but it's not like it's being ignored. In fact, I would say that one of the most interesting turns in say tornado and supercell research or storm research that I've seen is that there's an acknowledgement that we've gotten pretty good at issuing watches and warnings, but we're not good at all at getting people to respond the way we want to these. So we're actually getting like sociologists and psychologists involved in trying to find better ways for forecasters, operational meteorologists, to get inside your head to do what we want you to do because we don't want you to die, is what it really boils down to. So there is a lot of interesting research being done in severe weather. There could always be more, but it just takes time. Science takes a lot of time. A lot of it is just very, very incremental work, and it's a lifestyle, Science, that's why I'm here. I like science, and I like beer. So, yeah. This gentleman have one more question? Yeah.
You said that the models were written in Fortran?
Yes.
Why?
Why was the model written in Fortran? Are you a computer scientist by any chance? No. Okay. So Fortran is formula translator is what Fortran comes from. It was I think the language came about in the 60s. Back when there was punch cards, and I see a lot of gray-haired guys nodding and going, I was just a little too young to do the punch cards. But anyway, why Fortran? I'll give you a very honest answer. It's very good at doing number crunching, and Fortran has gone from like 66 to 77 to 90 to 95 to 2003. There have been updates to the language that have made it much nicer. We have memory protection, we have dynamic allocation, you can basically set an entire three-dimensional array to a value in one line of code. So there's a lot of stuff about Fortran that's gotten a lot nicer. It's not my favorite language. I really prefer C and Python, to be quite honest with you, but this model's written in Fortran and Fortran works, and I'm not gonna mess with it. I used to use a model that was written in C. I won't go down the whole which programming languages is the worst road, but It's written in Fortran because Fortran is a good tool for the job. If you look at high performance computing, you look at the amount of apps, what language are those apps run in? I would say more than half Fortran, a bunch C, C++ in there. I don't think you see anything on Python quite yet, but Python is just a scripting language that pulls everyone else's stuff in. But so anyway, yeah, it's because it works and it's supported. The compilers are good. Okay, so Cray has its own compiler for Fortran that's very fast. And as much as I don't like Fortran, there's some things about it that have gotten quite nice over the years. You know, you don't have common blocks anymore. You got modules. I mean, we could talk to you over the beer part, but yeah, George wrote the model in Fortran, and that's fine. When you're like a person like me, you just learn whatever you have to learn to get what you want to get done. So I never took a formal class. Well, I took 1/3 of a semester of Fortran here at UW when I was an undergrad, but most of my language learning has just been, you know, learning it. You got a problem that needs to be solved. That's the best way to learn a language, by the way. If any of you are just wondering, what's the best way to learn a computer language? Have a problem to solve that requires the use of it. You'll learn it. You'll learn a little piece of it anyway. But, you know, write a program that calculates how many blue marbles in the jar. No, that's not the most inspired way to learn a language, but you know. Anyway, so one more question maybe? Oh, couple. Okay, sure.
Is topography an input to your model?
Is topography an input to the model, or is it always flat? It is flat. The model can handle topography. Okay, the model has the capability to put topographical information in it. I have that turned off. One reason is, have you ever been to Oklahoma? Right, very, very flat. You might as well have a flat surface. But the serious answer to your question is, when you're trying to just understand how things work, like this sort of thing, it's often smart to sort of peel back the layers of complexity and reduce it to the minimum number of variables as you can. So before I start putting little valleys and mountains and hills and trees and stuff, which eventually we get high enough resolution we're going to have to, I'd like to understand the flat world first. Once I understand how the tornado and the supercell work in flatland, I can start to add topography in and then see how it changes things. So in other words, you sort of want to do, again, incremental. I have yet to explore the effects of topography, but again, the Great Plains is pretty flat, and I stand by that. You know, so, some people have done research with topography, but not at this scale. You know, there's just, we're getting to the point now, like I said, literally, we're going to eventually have to start putting buildings and stuff because we're getting to such high resolution, our assumptions about the surface are going to go out the window. So topography is definitely on my long list of things to do.
This is another question, but I want to follow up on what this gentleman just said. The Barneveld tornado, was that 84?
Barneveld, 1983.
83, because I...
Middle of the night.
My understanding is that was a topography-driven event.
That's a very bold statement to say that was a topography-driven event. That was.
Well, maybe I'm using the wrong words, but this is a tornado that came along and then hit a ridge. Yeah. On the 151.
Sure.
I don't mean to.
No. There's a okay. Yeah.
And I don't want to hang in here. I'm just saying this topography issue could be a big deal for those of us in Wisconsin.
Yes.
It's not quite so flat.
Right, and there is definitely theoretical support to the idea that topography, such as going not necessarily up a ridge, but like you're on a ridge and you go down a hill, will tend to help stretch things out a little bit. Now, I would say an F5 tornado like Barneveld was driven by Mother Nature. The topography was an afterthought. That's my scientific opinion, okay? Because no, and I'm not you're absolutely right. Everything matters. Let's just put it that way. Everything matters in these simulations and in the real atmosphere. That Barneveld tornado that you can still drive down. I always go to Governor Dodge, go camping and stuff, and I always go through Barneveld and notice that all the houses are 35 years old. You know, wonder why that is, or 30 years old. All the trees are all 32 years old. Well, yeah. I mean, some of you maybe saw Barneveld. I wasn't living here at the time, but it was a high end, and it just destroyed that town. So
thanks for correcting me because
no.
I was reading what I.
It's a lot of people have ideas about tornadoes. Some people think the isthmus is protected because it's surrounded by lakes. What do you think? Should we all just go to the Capitol and if there's a tornado? I don't know. Might as well. But no, it wouldn't. Sure, the lake would probably do something, but a big, strong tornado over a lake is just going to throw a lot of lake water around. And a lot of boaters too who didn't listen to the siren then.
So now, back to my original question.
Sure.
The
Fairdale tornado.
was about 30 miles east of where I grew up.
Okay. Dixon.
Computer here, grew up, did you grow up in Dixon too? So, and he had family that lived right there in Kell County.
Yeah.
When I watched video of that, the trail of the corn that went
Yes.
down, in the wake of it,
Cycloidal.
well,
Oh.
that's what's weird, is
Yeah.
that it's like 70% on one side and 30% on the other side. It is not right down the middle like you would expect like a wake of a boat, a power boat.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you can explain, first of all, is this something that happens? I saw it, but you just pointed out some things I think are inaccurate.
No, that's no. That's so you're saying what you saw. So if you're looking, I saw some figures from Fairdale too, and I can't write on the board too much, but I saw, so you have this damage pattern that kind of goes like that, but you're also seeing these like scalloped features that kind of show up. Those are the multiple vortices. I'm probably drawing them wrong, but those are those multiple vortices. So this was a multiple vortex tornado. So this is the center of the main tornado, but there's like vortices that are spinning around the center of a tornado, like you saw in the simulation. And
all predominantly on one side?
on one, were they on the right or? I think they were on the right, probably in the direction the storm was going.
50-50 chance of being right. So.
No, well here's the thing. It's like if here I am the tornado again, right? Oh man, I can't rotate when I walk. But if I'm rotating while I'm walking, I could, but I'll just throw up. From the ground perspective, the winds are stronger on my right side than on my left side if I'm rotating, right? Because I'm in the direction of rotation. The same is true for hurricanes. When you see a hurricane warning, or they issue a hurricane warning, say here's the Gulf Coast, there's Louisiana, you have this massive low pressure system rotating like this, right? But it's moving this way. So guess what? I just dropped my chalk. These people get the strongest winds. These people get slightly less strong winds because they're going in the opposite direction of a translation of the storm. And the same is true for tornadoes. But when it comes, the multiple vortices things and those scalloped lines you saw in the cornfields are beautiful evidence of the multiple vortex nature of the tornado. So you can imagine, just like that guy who was stuck on the side of the road, you can see this massive wedge, but inside that wedge are these guys doing this. And how they come and go, some of them don't even make a full rotation. So you may have just seen a fortuitous few little loops that happen to be on one side, or maybe there is a reason why they're more on one side. I don't know. Really, that's a tough one. But I do know what you're referring to because I saw some of the same footage, and I saved a couple of those pictures for talks like this where I talk about the multiple vortices because you can see them in the cornfields.
Any other questions?
I was wondering, how can you have two separate rotations within the same storm, and also where did the vortices come from within the tornado?
Ooh, good questions. How can you have stuff rotating in different directions from the same storm, and where do the vortices come from? Okay, let's answer the second question first. When I watch these simulations, I see a lot of rain falling in the forward flank, and that rain is falling in a messy way, and it's leaving the air kind of swirling around. That cold air that's swirling around is coming up against the warm atmospheric air in front of it, kind of like a boundary. And that helps to amplify things. It helps to sort of organize things. So you have this stuff that's kind of blah, 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 and then you shove it all under this monster updraft. When you have a strong updraft and you put some vorticity beneath it, it like amplifies it, it stretches it. So you have this little bundle of vorticity that's not very strong, and you stick it under a strong updraft, suddenly, and you saw some of this in the simulations, it suddenly becomes a blue tube or whatever. So to answer your second question, why don't they all rotate in the same direction, which is kind of related to what he asked. What if, again, the storm doesn't care too much about the Coriolis force and the rotation of the Earth because it's happening over a small area over a short time, and those things tend to take a lot of time. So all you need to do is get a vortex that's spinning this way to get shoved under an updraft, and it'll get stronger. Get one that goes this way, it'll get stronger. So there's all this vorticity out there. Some of it's rotating this way, some of it's that way, some of it's horizontal, and it's getting organized in really fascinating ways. And once it gets underneath the updraft, it gets amplified or stretched, and then suddenly you see blue guys and red guys that are suddenly tight vortices. But that's this vortex stretching is kind of what this all gets down to. But yeah, it's crazy. I hope I sort of touched on your answer. In other words, it's pretty chaotic and random, and it's not hard to get rotation in either direction. And once you park it under the updraft, it gets amplified.
Any other questions?
Is the damage mostly from wind speed or from sudden pressure changes?
Is the damage from wind speed, A, sudden pressure changes, B, or fleeing debris, C? You're right. Poorly worded question. Throw it out. All right. I've done that more times than I care to admit. So for a tornado, now, okay, this sort of gets to one of my pet peeves. In the 90s, I think, or the 80s, I used to hear the common wisdom was if a tornado is coming, the first thing you want to do is run around your house and open all your windows. No, don't do that. Look, man, you may have pretty good windows, but a 100-mile-an-hour tree branch is not going to stop. When you close or open your window, it's going to open. Mother Nature's going to open your window or open the side of your house. So don't do that. The theory was, well, this giant low pressure thing comes over my house and poof, it explodes like a ripe tomato. Well, no. Actually, your house is not that well sealed. Even if you drop the pressure a bunch, you're going to have, you might blow out the windows, but they'll take care of themselves. So what does the damage? The wind itself is moving at tremendous rate. So, a couple hundred miles an hour easily. I see winds in excess of 300 miles an hour, instantaneous winds. So very short-lived, very strong vortices. You can imagine the kinetic energy goes to 1/2 mv squared, so the velocity doubles. You have 4 times the kinetic energy, so the wind is doing most of the damage. The wind, once it lost debris, does heart-wrenching damage. Okay, if you've ever seen a car that has been tossed around by a tornado, you can't tell that it's a car. Okay, because it's just being thrown around. So in that case, it's a combination of the kinetic energy of the wind and solids and mostly things that are lifted up and lofted like debris. The pressure change itself isn't going to do damage. The pressure change is going to cause the winds, and the winds are going to do the damage. I don't think I've ever heard of a specific type of damage that was caused by low pressure causing like a window to explode or something. Even if it did, it'll be, oh, that's kind of cool. And then you can just fix your window. But anyway, so yeah, it's winds and then it's the things that lofts. I'll ask you a question. What's the biggest source of death and destruction from hurricanes? Not tornadoes. The storm surge. Yes, it's the storm surge. So if you are on a coastal region, and this has nothing to do with tornadoes, but we're talking about it anyway. Because what kills people? What's the most hazardous part? Storm surge is because the surface of the water is kind of it can be moved. You have a strong hurricane pushing all that water on land, and you drown people. That's the biggest killer for hurricanes. And after that, I think it's flooding from like just the precipitation. Then it's the wind or something. So so the things that get us aren't always the things we see. we think they are. But anyway, that's just a random little thing.
You know what they say in Texas?
If you don't like the weather right now, just wait 5 minutes? No? What do they say in Texas?
Run from the water, hide from the wind.
Run from the water.
That's the motto for her.
Run from the water, hide from the wind. Yeah, that's a good one.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.